in October, but we did take the Christmas Day has now become Christmas month for us in the city. So we did take the month of December off for Planning Commission. So we have those 2 meetings and the minutes in there. As long as you're okay with that, again, let's formally approve those so we can place them on file.
Olson to approve.
Second, Fair.
Motion by Eric Olson, second by Pat Fair, that we approve the minutes from the October 7th, 2020 meeting, and then also the October 26th, 2020 meeting. Any discussion on those?
There was a typo on the October 26th
Okay.
minutes. The adjournment time was incorrect, and I told Sandy about it, and she said she was going to correct it.
Okay. She just hasn't corrected it on what we have, I'm guessing, huh?
Right.
Okay. All right. Aaron, you want to make sure that that does get corrected?
Yeah, I will do that. I see the mistake.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Anybody that would like to abstain? Motion carried. All right, we're going to go to action items, and the first one is the discussion on ordinance number 01-2021. This is an ordinance amending ordinance number 09-2020, and you can see that Aaron has shared that. You also have it in your packet, but Aaron shared that on the screen. And Aaron, I'll turn it over to you, and then you can move it whatever direction you want with staff.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mayor. So we're bringing forward a map, which you'll see here. One of the attachments, I'll get to it in a second. This map is what it's doing. It's officially designating the boundaries for the Fulton Street Corridor Overlay District as we worked through the zoning code update and the repeal and reenactment of Chapter 17. We discussed it. We talked about those boundaries. We talked about the Fulton Street Corridor District at length, and it's generally described in the written portion of Chapter 17, but it is not specifically described. The thing that does that is the map, the zoning map, and so we're bringing that forward for official review and adoption. And without saying any more, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to explain this, and I'll move right along to the map, zoom out here so you guys can see the area that we have hashed out as that overlay district. And we believe that this is exactly the area that we had talked about as plan commissioners and staff, but we are also open for discussion if there are surprises or if you guys have any comments or questions.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Plan Commission. Happy New Year. The short of this is it's an oversight on my part. There's a section in the updated zoning ordinance, and if you forgive me, I'm just going to read it. It's a brief 2-sentence section, but it says, incorporation of zoning district map. Quote, the locations and boundaries of the zoning districts are hereby established as shown on the map entitled City of Waupaca Zoning Districts, hereafter the zoning map, on file in the Community and Economic Development Department office. The zoning district map, together with all information shown thereon and all amendments thereto, shall be as much a part of this chapter as if fully set forth and described herein. So basically what that means is the zoning ordinance and the zoning map are not distinctly separate things, but part and parcel of the same. And the oversight on my part was not ensuring that the footprint of the map, the footprint of the Fulton Street corridor that you see before you was not part of the public hearing for the updated zoning ordinance. So as Aaron alluded to a moment ago, the ordinance established and all the discussions that occurred with the Plan Commission during the public hearing and with Common Council, we established the Fulton Street Corridor Overlay District as those B4 district parcels, basically West Fulton Street. What we didn't do is provide the map along with it. So Aaron and I, in consultation with Attorney Hart, agreed that in order to make it formal, to make sure that there was no question about its establishment, we would come before the Plan Commission and then go for public hearing and hopefully Common Council approval in the not too distant future. There is, as Aaron alluded, there's one question that we do have regarding the boundaries of the overlay. So if you'll notice, you have that shade of brown, let's call it the darker brown that you're looking at. And there are the bulk of the parcel that exists to the left and to the right of the interchange. And then there are a number of parcels, looks like about 4 or 5 down in the far southwestern corner. The black diagonal lines that overlay the bulk of the B4 parcels to the east constitute what we envision as the Fulton Street corridor overlay. Now, there's no legal reason that we couldn't include those disconnected parcels down to the southwest. The reason we're leaning towards not including them is overlays tend to be contiguous parcels, meaning the parcels themselves, unless bifurcated by a road or a river, are contiguous with all other parcels that are zoned B4 or are within that overlay. And in the case of these 4 or 5 down to the southwest, you see there's a pretty significant gap. I'm not sure what that distance is, but potentially a fifth of a mile, a quarter of a mile, whatever the case may be, below the B4 district and those. So I think the argument that we would make, given that the purpose of the Fulton Street corridor is a multi-use, pedestrian-friendly, kind of vibrant, dynamic corridor, mixed-use corridor, and there are requirements around pedestrian access and bicycle facilities and things, I'm not sure that it makes a lot of sense to impose those on parcels that are not contiguous to the bulk or the body of the overlay itself. So I'd like to leave it there for a moment and entertain any questions that the Plan Commission has regarding what Aaron discussed and what I've just discussed.
I have a question. This is fair. Why is what would be across from the golf course area where the new apartments are going in, that's in yellow, why is that not included?
Thank you, Mr. Fair. Aaron, could you point that out with your cursor?
Yeah, right here. It's a planned unit development.
Okay, the short answer is the PUD is a distinct district from the B4 district. Certainly the PUD could request, the owner of that property could request a rezone from PUD to B4 strip commercial district. And upon approval, the B4 would then fall under the auspices of this FSC overlay. But since the FSC overlay is specific to the B4 footprint, it is not at present.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from commissioners or surprises?
I think we've had enough surprises for the day.
That's an understatement.
Justin, looks like you're raising your hand.
Yeah. It looks like there might be a sliver of B3 near Western Avenue or adjacent to Western Avenue there. Was it the auto parts store?
Right
Aaron,
here.
can you indicate that, cursor?
Is that not part of the overlay, or is that not included in the overlay?
Yeah, Aaron, can you show that parcel with the cursor?
Yeah, it's this. Yeah, it's right here. It's that light brown that's wedged in between all the B4. So for some reason, there's a B3 stuck amongst a bunch of B4 in the current zoning.
Yeah, good question, Justin. I think going back to Mr. Fair's comment, because the overlay is specific to the underlying B4 base zone, it's not included. But that owner could petition for rezone from B3 to B4 and fall underneath it. And it would make a lot of sense, right? Because the B3 district does not create the opportunities that the B4 under the Fulton Street corridor overlay would. On the other hand, if it's not in the Fulton Street corridor, if it's not within the Fulton Street corridor overlay, it would not have to comply with the FSC overlay site planning requirement. So it would be up to the landowner to decide to do that. The city of Waupaca cannot compel that rezone. But if the landowner were to request an application, or excuse me, were to submit an application for zoning change, and were I to review it, I would almost certainly recommend approval. So I guess the ball would be in that landowner's court.
So if any of these properties are not B4, rezoned to B4 that are in,
I think I lost you, Justin.
so like, oh shoot,
We can hear you now, Justin.
can you? So any property, so like even those residentials, or no matter what the zoning is, if they rezone to B4, will they fall underneath the overlay Fulton Street district?
Yes, if they're contiguous to another B4 parcel.
Okay.
Jeff, is there, so, I mean, they pointed out a few of those properties that seem like they maybe should be rezoned, or discussion maybe should be had with the property owners, and I'm assuming that everything's okay as long as they don't change what they're currently doing. I mean, would it be a recommendation that we would try to get these all zoned the same?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Mayor. Really, I think the bulk of the parcels that would come into play here would be obviously the two PUDs, the two yellow areas, but then the main body would be the red areas south of the lake, and then the red areas just north of the northern part of the B4 footprint. Right now, those landowners can avail themselves of all the uses within that district. And I think it's is that B5 district, Aaron? I think. I can't see the color.
Which color are you looking at?
The bright red.
I think it's R3.
Oh, no, that's R3. I'm sorry. Apologies. That's R3. Right now, those landowners would be limited to the R3 multifamily residential district. Certainly, if they were to petition for a rezone again to B4, I would see very little reason not to approve it, contingent upon them having a plan for development consistent with the FSC overlay. What I mean by that is, if they're just requesting a, excuse me, if an individual landowner were just requesting a B4 to be zoned B4, I would be a little bit reticent to recommend approval on that, because they could take advantage. I don't mean that in a manipulative way, but they could then take advantage of uses that are not consistent with R3 uses. So anything that exists in the B4 district. So I think one of my recommendations for the Plan Commission as a condition of approval would be to have a plan that would be consistent with the B4 FSC overlay. Now, if the landowners came forward with something like that, I would, again, from the perspective of the zoning administrator, it's something I would probably recommend approval of. But from a policy standpoint, that's up to you as Plan Commission members. There are a number of things that we could do. I mean, we could just we could have a policy to entertain any rezone request within this general area from whatever it is to B4 district as something that we would approve. Another option, which is a bit more complicated and potentially a bit more problematic, would be to expand the Fulton Street corridor overlay to include districts other than just the B4. All of those options are available. I think the first one I mentioned, placing conditions upon an approved rezone, would probably be the cleanest, the most efficient, and more likely than not in the best interest of the overlay. But the other two are certainly viable.
Okay.
Sorry, long-winded answer to a simple question.
Well, we're used to that with you, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Well, is my mic on? So, Jeff, be to our advantage a little bit. And I know we have a number of zonings, but at least the ones that we're talking about, you know, I'm sure that our newest member is probably sitting there thinking, what the heck does all this mean? You know, if we could just maybe explain that a little bit better.
Sure. And then before I end that topic, I do want to reference Andrew and the comp plan, because that's gonna play a role in this as well. So zoning districts, and again, I'll just do the basic zoning 101. Zoning districts are based upon established base zones. That means every parcel within the city of Waupaca is designated a specific zoning district: residential district, commercial, residential, business, industrial, etc. The B4 district is called the B4 strip commercial district. It's the brown footprint that we see before us. It's associated with what the Fulton Street corridor was once, meaning a conventional commercial corridor, typically large lots, big box retail, and the kind of services and dining options associated with interchanges. What's happened over time is those types of corridors have found it a bit tougher go, financially and otherwise, exacerbated by certainly the housing crisis of the 2008 recession, and now as a result of COVID-19. So what we did is looked at this entire district and basically asked a simple question. Is it viable? Is it a viable path forward to retain a conventional B4 strip commercial footprint, or does the unfortunate loss of some stores that, you know, were historically significant in the community provide an opportunity to revisit this corridor? And what I put together as a draft many months ago was this concept of a multi-use, mixed-use corridor that would serve kind of as an opening or a welcome to downtown Waupaca. You could still retain all existing uses. Any use that is currently in place in the B4 district would be preserved as a conforming, not a non-conforming use. But when there was a substantive change to the use of any parcel, it would fall under the requirements of this thing called the Fulton Street Corridor Overlay. So what an overlay district is basically just as it sounds. It's an additional set of requirements and often additional flexibility that lays down over the top of the underlying base zone. So in this case, the Fulton Street Corridor lays down on top of all of those B4 district dark brown parcels that we're looking at. And it creates the opportunity for mixed uses, meaning differing uses that can occur both in the same structure, on the same parcel, or on abutting parcels. So you can have residential and commercial uses in the same structure. In theory, you could have residential and light industrial uses in the same structure, or in abutting structures on the same property. So that's, without going into too boring of detail, that's basically what we're looking at. We're taking a conventional base zone and we're overlaying, creating this thing called the Fulton Street Corridor to overlay the top of it. The questions that have been asked by Mr. Fair, Mr. Behrens, and Mayor Smith are, what about all the parcels that we're looking at that are not dark brown, and what is the potential benefit to considering them as part of the overlay? And that's the policy question that really is up to you as Plan Commission members. I can certainly make recommendations and comments, but it's the prerogative of you as Plan Commission members to decide, you know, we want to leave it as we have before us, or we want to open it up and expand it to include those disconnected B4 parcels to the west, or frankly, any other parcels within the corridor.
Aaron, this is Pat speaking. And I'm kind of directing this at you, but certainly anybody else can weigh in. As part of this overlay, we've included in that the old Churney building. How does that fit into what Ruby's Pantry might want to do?
Good question, Pat. So Ruby's Pantry, and we're going to be bringing that forward as well as kind of a phase 2 change, but you know, they're looking to operate as a distribution center. the overlay district is intended to allow for that. Now, if you remember through, and it's not that simple though. If you remember through the conversation throughout chapter 17, we could allow through that through a conditional use permit and then also a site plan review. So even though they're not doing additions to the building or whatever it might be, they would be required to meet site plan requirements as set forth by staff and plan commission to mitigate any possible negative impacts of having a former I-1 type use in a B4 area. So long story short, Pat, places like Ruby's, places like Kmart, places like Shopko, this overlay district is designed to provide a path forward for them, but they'll have to work with plan commission and staff and making sure it's a good fit for the area.
Yeah, and
Okay.
just to add on to what Aaron, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to say thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
Just to build off that a little bit, the burden then is on staff and the plan commission to utilize site plan review requirements and the Fulton Street corridor overlay requirements to ensure that when you have a use that might otherwise be incompatible with adjoining uses, you can mitigate, minimize, and in many cases eliminate those potential offsite impacts. So for instance, when you're talking about a distribution center, you're talking about truck traffic, right? You're talking about vehicles coming in and going out some number during certain hours of the day. The Fulton Street corridor will allow us to establish, first of all, what the hours of operation can be for the distribution center between these hours on weekdays and those hours on weekends. We can establish visual buffering, in other words, vegetative or fencing screening requirements to diminish the visual impact of that use from abutting properties. And then the site plan review process will allow us to compel the landowners to green up the site to meet the minimum open space requirements in the B4 district. Those happen to be 25%. For those of you familiar with that, the existing parcel, the existing green footprint is probably somewhere around 10%, give or take. So in order to move forward, they're going to have to increase the impervious surface, increase the landscaping elements. For the parking requirements, they're going to have vegetative buffering to, again, diminish the view of the parking. So again, the short version of what I just said is the site plan review process is going to ensure that the use that's proposed can happen in harmony with the district as a whole and the parcels that immediately abut it.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I think you're on mute.
I can't believe you guys can't read my lips after all the times I forget to unmute. So any other questions specific to that otherwise I think, Aaron, and Jeff, what's our next step tonight is, I mean, this is an ordinance form. Obviously, this is something that has to be, that we would just recommend to council, and do we still have to have a public hearing on this, or if you said that tonight, I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but.
No, we didn't. Good question. So the plan commission would be taking action to approve this on the zoning map, and then it would move to we'd have to give 14 days notice. It would move to a public hearing, which would it would take place before the council meeting on February 2nd. The first reading would happen that night, and then the second reading would happen at the council meeting February 16th. And if it all went through with no changes, that's when it would be adopted.
Okay. All right. So is there any other detail that we need to know about this ordinance, Jeff, that you can think of?
No, sir, other than to just reiterate something Aaron alluded to a few minutes ago, and that is there are some additional housekeeping amendments to the zoning ordinance we're going to have to address, and those will be coming before the Plan Commission within the next, I think, at the next meeting.
Okay. So the same February meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Hearing no other questions, we have this ordinance that we need to act on if we would, and that would be just to recommend to council that that we approve this ordinance number 09/2020.
I'll make that in the form of a motion fair that we recommend to council the adoption of the ordinance.
Keelan second.
Okay. Motion by Pat Fair, second by Alan Keelan, that we recommend to the city council ordinance number 09/2020, which repeals and then recreates chapter 17 of the zoning code, City of Waupaca Municipal Code. Any further discussion? Again, I think we could just do voice vote at the planning commission level here. So we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Anybody that would like to abstain? All right, motion carried. Thank you, Jeff, Aaron, on that topic. All right, and then we are on to the discussion, and this is just a discussion item tonight again, but this is the comprehensive plan update. And Aaron, you going to start this or just turn it over to Andrew here?
I'll go ahead and turn this one right over to Andrew. He's got a presentation prepared and he'll take you through it.
All right, awesome.
Okay, can you hear me, Aaron?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I think I'll just, I'll leave my video off just to conserve my bandwidth for the time being. So, yeah, just because I know we got at least one new person here, just a really quick background. The city, state of Wisconsin passed a law in the 90s requiring communities that want to do zoning, regulate land use, that they have a comprehensive plan, and that cities update these comprehensive plans every 10 years. Your last plan was put together in 2007, so essential, and it was called the City of Waupaca Year 2030 Comprehensive Plan. It was essentially about a 20-year vision. And so we're doing essentially an update to that plan, pretty significant update. And over the last 12 to 13 months. And we one of the unique things about this is that we were able to sort of kickstart this process right around the time that the city was looking at its own strategic planning. We are now getting towards the end here. And this document is sort of like the 50,000 foot high sort of document. It's really supposed to really tie a lot of the functional plans, the area plans, the strategic plans. It's supposed to be sort of broad policy documents. So, if somebody's trying to figure out, what's the city trying to accomplish? What are our long range vision? The comprehensive plan is supposed to answer that. And the meat of the comprehensive plan is the land use chapter, and that includes, and the meat of the land use chapter is the future land use map. The future land use map is again that sort of vision of what you want to see redeveloped or newly developed in the city out into the future. And once you adopt that future land use map, that provides you an opportunity to go back and adjust your zoning, adjust your subdivision ordinances, adjust your official maps. There's a number of different kind of tools that you can use to try to implement that vision as sort of manifested in that future land use plan. So you can jump to the next slide, Aaron. So tonight I was going to go over, I had shared with this group essentially over the past year, we've gone through most of the chapters of the comp plan. And so what I intended to do today was to just kind of wanted to go over these goals and strategies, see if there's any feedback on them, and then I'll present again and kind of go through the proposed future land use map, and then we will from there we'll actually have an opportunity at our next Plan Commission meeting, after you've had a chance to actually look at the final document, formatted document. I'll have that out here within the next week. So you'll have a month to sort of look at that document. And then at our next meeting in February, staff will be asking the Plan Commission to essentially pass a resolution recommending adoption of the comp plan to council. Council ultimately needs to adopt the comprehensive plan through an ordinance, and the intent is for that to happen in March. So this is getting into the goals and strategies piece of this. Well, actually, Aaron, go back to that last slide. I was going to make a really quick comment on this. This is actually one of my favorite little slides. It's from 2014, but the date is pretty good. It hasn't changed that much. But Trulia does a big survey asking where they live today and where they'd like to live in 5 years. And for the last several times they've done the survey, they've gotten the same answers back. It's showing that most of the people that live in urban and suburban areas would not like to live. A significant chunk of those folks actually would prefer to live somewhere else, and that's in more rural areas like Waupaca. So I think the city has a kind of a neat opportunity right now, especially with COVID and with the increased opportunities with remote work, to capitalize on capturing some growth here over the next few years. Next slide. So some of the major changes between this update and the last comprehensive plan. This is really, we tried to make this a more strategic, a little bit more tied to the city's strategic plan, a little more operational. The previous comprehensive plan and most comprehensive plans tend to be very general, fluffy, flowery language, and not a lot of direction, I guess. And so we tried to be a little bit more sort of goal and action oriented with this. We also, when we did our focus groups and conversations with business leaders and input from citizens and businesses, one of the big emphasis, perhaps the biggest one, was on housing and quality of life. So there's a big focus on housing here. And then I've added some goals and strategies related to arts, culture, social connectedness, and as well as the downtown. Next slide. So this was a sorry about that. This was just a summary slide here that shows the overall goals for the housing and neighborhood chapters, and then the strategies underneath these strategies are some action items. So I wanted to I'll just pause and see if anybody has any comments or feedback related to housing and some of the ideas that we've put out there so far. Not hearing any, I'll just make a few quick comments on housing, and that is there seemed to be a strong support for providing both market rate housing, new housing opportunities, as well as addressing workforce housing or affordability. So we're kind of focused here on looking at kind of a broad spectrum of housing types and price points, and looking at opportunities, both infill opportunities and new edge development opportunities to provide additional land to grow the population and support new housing opportunities within the city. All right, next slide. The land use, the overall goals were really, a couple of the big ones, trying to strengthen, these mixed-use corridors. Fulton, Main, and Churchill streets are sort of the commercial retail sort of engines of the city outside of the industrial areas. And so that was one of the goals. The other goal is really looking at this in terms of neighborhood development. And so trying to think about, as the city grows, how we can essentially provide opportunities for people to sort of access goods and services within their neighborhoods, so that people do have that opportunity to have a, whether it's a coffee shop or a convenience store or a restaurant, that there's opportunities for folks in different areas of the city to enjoy the amenities and be less dependent on their car. Justin, do you have your hand up?
I did, and the previous slide, the housing one, is there a certain house value that I guess will be in demand, or that you see will be needed over, I guess, a different price point?
Yeah, I did a pretty kind of in-depth market analysis of housing here. And I'll have some of those figures in the final comp plan. I also have a bunch of stuff, I'd be happy to share with you at any time. But what we saw, what I believe was, and what I put as the sort of projections was, I felt over the next 10 years that that if you've got the land available, that we could target, up to say 25 new homes and, 25 to 50 multi-unit residences a year over that time period. And I believe there's a gap, and particularly at the upper mid to upper income levels, there's a significant gap in housing availability. And then also, there seems to be a gap in terms of workforce rental housing. So, a lot of this stuff that's going in now, the newer buildings that we're going in, they're going for $900 to $1,200 for a, 2-bedroom unit. And for folks that are working, minimum wage or $15 an hour or whatever, it's just a little high. So we're looking at, with the workforce housing, we would try to target something in that more of that $600 to $900 a month price point for folks. So I think there's kind of a demand in those two areas. So yeah, with the land use, there's, kind of looking at, the city's basically gotten, because of all the environmental constraints, you've had to really sprawl out. So the geography of the city, it's a very large spread out city for a relatively small population. And so in order to grow, we got to be pretty strategic to make sure that it's done cost effectively. And certainly want to take advantages of opportunities to redevelop and do infill in areas that are already served by utilities. That being said, with the environmental constraints and the water and the slopes and the wetlands and the floodplains, that's a challenge. So we also are looking at sort of edge development opportunities on the periphery of the city. And there's a number of different things that need to happen to facilitate this. And I think we're kind of already headed down that path with doing a lot of updates to the zoning code in particular, and looking at annexation opportunities on some of the peripheral areas, as well as making some changes to the future land use map, which we'll get into in a minute here. Next slide, Aaron. So transportation, like a lot of these areas, you've actually, over the last 5 years, you've done a lot of planning, and really we're kind of trying to sort of draw the threads and sort of craft a strategy here to bring a lot of these plans together. You did a parking study, you've done a wayfinding and branding study, you're about to do a bicycle trails plan. You really have, I think, a pretty good, you've got some good ideas and direction. We got a lot of feedback from folks that bikeability, walkability, trails, access to parks, as well as access to the river and waterfront amenities is a huge priority. So this transportation chapter really emphasizes a lot of the bikeability, the walkability. Also, it sort of identifies the need to sort of look ahead and, try to stay abreast of changes. It's likely in the next 5 to 10 year period here, we're going to have autonomous vehicles. We're going to have electric, car infrastructure. There's going to be major changes to transportation. So we've also identified a need, to stay abreast of those changes through professional development. And then finally, codifying a lot of these standards. Similar to what we're doing with the zoning standards, we need to go back and take a look at the public works standards, some of the other areas of the code where we can perhaps we want to change. For example, we've talked about in the past is the minimum street width for the city, is it perhaps too wide? Are there occasions where a smaller low traffic residential street doesn't need to be, 36 feet wide, Justin, or 32?
It's 32 with council approval, but the standard is 36.
Yeah. So, are there opportunities to look at a set of street typologies where, we look at, an opportunity to save money and to create a more livable street with, so there's some opportunities to change, make some updates to the public works section of the municipal code. Next slide. All right, economic development. This was the fun one. So really, we heard people wanted a real economy here that really supports both the sort of manufacturing and blue collar jobs as well as, the white collar jobs. And one of the things, ironically, as we were looking at workforce housing development and some grant opportunities this last year, Aaron and I found out that the cities, and in terms of bonding too, I think the city's high percentage of manufacturing jobs, very high, 25% or something, is actually seen as a liability in some people's eyes. We want to make sure that the city continues to be attractive for those types of good paying jobs, but at the same time, put together some strategies to grow some of the service and software and technology related jobs that we think would really make sense in Waupaca, especially now with people having the ability to work remotely. We think there's a huge opportunity to grow that section of the economy as well. And then, so we put together a fairly detailed, I think, action plan here for economic development. Next slide. Downtown Waupaca, it's really just taking the results of that recently completed downtown plan and kind of incorporating. I put together a simple goal here out of that study. We know that housing is kind of a critical component of a healthy, thriving downtown, and we know that right now, an overwhelming majority of the housing in the downtown, in that core downtown area, is low income and affordable, and in some cases is good quality, and in some other cases, not as great quality. So we think providing more housing opportunities at different price points downtown is really going to help strengthen the district. And then the other strategies, doing the Main Street project, starting to implement the wayfinding plan, looking at, you guys also completed a Rotary Riverview Park master plan, so it's looking at the next 5 to 10 years, implementing some of those projects in the downtown area. Next slide. Parks and natural resources. Again, you guys just finished a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, so it's trying to just boil down and incorporate some of those strategies here. the focus is sort of on maintaining the existing parks and trails. You guys have a abundancy of them, but we want to also look at opportunities to, as the city does grow, there may be the need to add in more little parks, and especially as we do these larger as we do subdivisions, say for example, Timber Ridge, Swiderski development, if we were to see additional growth out there, it would probably make sense to incorporate some type of neighborhood park, if that area were to grow. And then I would just say finally, number 3, as I was looking at the comprehensive outdoor rec plan and then my notes from our public input, there seemed to be a really strong interest in sort of leveraging the rivers and the greenways for recreational development. But I think also for economic development. I think if you can come up with a framework for green space and trails, I think what we'll see is an opportunity to, as we get new housing development in and new developers here, an opportunity to really leverage those assets and create places and neighborhoods and developments that really tie really nicely to those assets and become selling points for those developments. So I kind of see those working. I see that sort of parks piece working hand in hand with the economic development. All right, next slide, Aaron. Community facilities, we heard a lot of things, taking steps to improve waste and recycling, continuing to invest in utilities. We heard people from the survey and the public input, wanting to see some opportunities to expand, green infrastructure, renewable energy. So perhaps taking a look at those opportunities, whether it's out at the airport or on a piece of city-owned land or at a park, there could be some opportunities there. Internet, it's important. And then public safety and so looking also at the long-term needs of the police and fire departments. Next slide. Arts, culture, and community. Again, you guys in 2017, you actually put together an arts and culture plan with some of the arts stakeholders. Out of that came the Waupaca area arts network, and I think a greater sense of collaboration and partnership amongst folks in the arts community. You also recently updated the city's library the city did a strategic library plan. So looked to review those documents, and one of the key elements seems to be, how do you create that social connectedness and sense of community? So you can do that through education, the library, programs and partnerships that get people involved in history and culture and events. And so we're looking at, how do we leverage those assets to strengthen the community and create that sense of inclusion that people are looking for when they move to the area. All right, next slide. And then I'm not even going to go through all these, but there's a lot of opportunities, more so than ever, I think, cooperation, collaboration, intergovernmental partnerships is really the name of the game here, to try to, at some point here, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and we're going to be probably faced with some pretty lean budget years, I would imagine, in the wake of COVID, and as government levels tighten their belts at all levels. And we know that Waupaca's, there's an interest to drive the mill rate down. So a lot of that comes down to partnering. All right, Aaron, future land use. This was kind of the meat. I guess I'll just stop there and see, did anybody have any comments on those previous slides? Anything they wanted to chime in with? Okay. These are the changes to the future land use map. I think the major changes are reduce the number of categories. We identified more land for residential development, and including medium density residential development. They may include some not just apartment complexes, but some additional opportunity to do fourplexes or eightplexes, or three plexes. Emphasis on the mixed-use corridors, the Fulton Street corridor, like we talked about, neighborhood-oriented. We made a few significant proposed changes here, including the business park, and those are items that we'll have to continue that deserve more discussion beyond just adopting this plan. But we're trying to find area, and we think one potential area to add housing maybe in the business park. Next slide, Aaron. So you can't even really read this. So suffice it to say, we've got outside of the city's limits, there's a 1.5 mile area, which is an extraterritorial planning and zoning area. Within that buffer area, the city has the ability to control to some degree what type of development occurs, so that if and when the city grows, those areas can be brought into the city cost effectively. So we've looked at the surrounding towns, and what I've looked at their future land use plans and their zoning codes, and then we've tried to identify some areas here where we think development would be best suited. Next slide. All right, so this series of slides basically chops up the future land use map into some smaller digestible bites. The black dots are represent little keynotes that have description. They'll each have a paragraph or two within the comp plan, so it'll be descriptive. The letters indicate areas outside of the current city limits, and the numbers reference areas within the city. So if you look to the west of US 10, there's several letters. C in the upper left is an extension of Timber Ridge Road, where the Swiderski development is, off of Fulton Street. That is an area that was identified in your previous comp plan as sort of a mixed use area. The town of Farmington has that identified as kind of a mixed use area. I've shown that as residential. I believe that we want to focus and concentrate our commercial uses along at the Fulton Street QQ, Fulton Street. We want to focus those commercial uses in areas where they just make more sense. So I've identified that as medium density residential. That could include a combination of single family as well as apartments or different housing types. To the south, to the south is an area, again, that was identified as mixed use expansion previously. Again, I'm showing that as residential. And, perhaps along the road and adjacent the existing senior living you have off of QQ, it might make sense to do some higher density, residential. And then maybe to the south, it may make more sense, to have a little lower density, single family. North of A, there's a orange area there. That's B. I'm showing that as neighborhood mixed use. So that's a category that could include some residential. It could include, some higher density residential as well as some sort of neighborhood oriented retail, restaurant services. And again, my thought is, you put those closer towards Fulton Street, closer towards the higher traffic areas. You already have some businesses up there, so let's concentrate the businesses in areas in nodes, and then let's leave some areas where we've got residential, but within close proximity. H is the Wenkus farm or property. There's actually a big lake, couple big lakes over there. There's been a bunch of development on Old Taylor Lake. Wenkus Lake to date is mostly undeveloped and, may make sense to stay undeveloped. I don't know, but I'm showing that as residential because it is in fact zoned residential right now. And I think if that's going to be developed, it probably makes sense for that to be developed. It may make sense for that to be developed, within the city. Shifting over to the right, over towards the, I think it's Highway 22, the Brush Recycling Center. I think it's number 3 on the map. This is a significant change, proposed change, and it's subject to additional research and study. But the idea here, you know, when we got feedback from the community and folks said, why aren't we leveraging our interchanges for more economic development? And we started looking around, this site popped out as a potential infill redevelopment site where, you know, long term, we might have an opportunity to get some residential or commercial growth in here. Again, that's not going to happen overnight. That may be a 5-10 year project, but the idea here is to sort of start taking a look at the feasibility of doing that. And then going to the north there along Fulton Street, actually that Kmart Shopco area, that's number 2. That is kind of shown as community mixed use. So again, the idea here is that this community mixed use designation, larger tracts of land, you know, is there an opportunity there for a Target or a Walmart to come in? We know that that's a priority for a lot of people, probably not for everybody, but it seemed to be a theme that was very loudly heard in the public comments and the surveys that we got. So we want to take a look at that as a kind of a special planning area to see if there's an opportunity to either bring in a larger retailer or to do a redevelopment there that could include, you know, a mix of some residential as well as some, you know, restaurants or retail. I believe the Fulton Street corridor is already a pretty strong mixed use corridor. You actually have a lot of residential uses, especially to the north, and a lot of apartments and some condos up there. And I think this could be a very attractive area for additional condo development or multifamily development. And I also think it could be a really attractive area for a big box retailer. So hence that designation. To the north is D. We've got that shown as residential. That's to the east of the Lamplighter Run Covered Bridge Subdivision. So that's shown as potential residential growth, and also north of the Kmart site, former Kmart site. Again, you got a lot of land up there. It's a great opportunity to do infill residential development. I think it's a great opportunity to do it in a way that actually builds off of the kind of traditional building blocks and gridded street network of North Street and the streets to the east. And then finally, number 4, that's kind of downtown. What I'm showing there is just medium density residential. So you've got some blocks and some areas in the downtown. Maybe you've got maybe there's an opportunity on some of these areas that are bordering the downtown. If you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, buildings on a block that are in pretty rough shape, maybe there's an opportunity to, you know, do some townhomes in there or do some newer development at a slightly higher density. Next slide. This kind of zooms into the downtown area. I would call your attention to number 5 right in the middle. This is a significant change to what you have currently. Right now, you've got the former county highway shop as well as all the school and municipal buildings along School Street are all shown as governmental, public institutional. And now we're changing this future land use map to show those as medium density residential. I think, again, leveraging the river, the waterfront, there's one thing we know, people like to live on water. And with the proximity to the downtown, I think both of these sites are very attractive, very compelling for, I would say, whether it could be condos, it could be townhomes, but I would say, you know, market rate, you know, higher end housing. Let's reserve the best sites to do development that's going to yield the most return in terms of property taxes. So we want to look at these high value waterfront sites to do market rate development, and we want to look at lesser value sites to do workforce development. Number 7 is Churchill Street corridor. That currently is commercial and a future planned commercial. It's kind of a mix of zoning districts. I've got that as neighborhood mixed use. Again, I actually believe that again may be a great opportunity to do some workforce housing. You're close to schools, transportation, parks. It's a relatively high density part of the city, and so it's pretty walkable. Healthcare. So I think that could be a really attractive place to do some infill housing. Next slide. All right, and then this is another pretty significant change here. Was off to the east, and so we're looking at. I think that's number 8 is the business park up to the north, just below the purple, which is industrial. So I'm just using these conventional color schemes, and industrials can typically purple. So in the previous future land use map, it was gray, and this is purple. In the previous future land use map, if you actually look on the left, you're going to see outside of the city to the east, there's a giant area that's hashed over in gray, and that's planned industrial expansion. What I did here is I instead of pushing out in that direction with the industrial expansion, I've shown industrial expansion to the north. You already have a rail spur there. You've got some right of way. It appears as though you could put in additional roads up there. So one thought would be to go north with industrial expansion in the future, and then preserve that land out to the east for residential. Excuse me. So that's what I'm kind of showing here. Probably the biggest change here is number 8, the business park. I think what's happened over time is at some point in time, there was a desire to build a business park out there, and there was a significant amount of investment. And it was very typical. A lot of communities across the entire country build industrial parks. Many of them have sat empty. And I think what's happened organically over time is that, you guys have been responding to the market, and the market has said, let's put a education, let's put a gym, let's put a daycare, let's put an office building, let's put a light manufacturing. So you kind of have this sort of organic sort of neighborhood emerging, and this future land use plan really says, let's treat this as a special planning area. Let's perhaps go in this area, do some sort of, do some more focused neighborhood planning and some studies, come up with some development concepts, maybe think about what the road, how that land might get subdivided. And let's think about, the possibility of maybe building a neighborhood out here. We know that there's interest. We've had some developers express interest in doing housing out here. So the thought process here is I flipped it to community mixed use instead of expressly industrial. And again, that would just provide us some flexibility to look at maybe integrating some other uses out there. So that's a big one. Honestly, that's not going to happen overnight. These are big changes. I think it's good stuff to have in the comp plan. It certainly deserves more analysis. And then I guess the other piece I'll just comment on, Eastgate Subdivision down there. Again, you had this before that was community, commercial, industrial, mixed use, blah, 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 blah. You've already got the residential out there. I'm showing additional residential. I think you have a nice opportunity to just build off of what the positive momentum that's already going on over there. Justin and I have talked about, could we potentially look at expanding that neighborhood to the east? Now there is one large property owner there, and then you also have the secondary flight runway. So there's some development hindrances, but I think that could be a nice opportunity for you. And then that area that, again, was previously shown as light industrial, I've changed that to neighborhood mixed use. If we're going to add more housing out there, and you already have a big apartment complex, if we're going to add more housing and we're going to have 200, 300, 400 people living in this neighborhood, maybe we want to keep some of that for storage or light industrial. I showed it as neighborhood mixed use. Again, it might provide a little bit more flexibility in terms of having some more compatible land uses out there. Now that I look at that, maybe we want to keep some of that as light industrial. I might have gone a little too crazy with the neighborhood mixed use there. Yeah, so those are the big changes.
And can I make a couple comments, Andrew?
Please do.
Okay, I just want to do a couple things. I know we're throwing out community mixed use, medium density residential. I just wanted to define a couple of those just so they can kind of get an idea for what that is. So let me just go to 8, the industrial park or the business park. When Andrew speaks of community mixed use, the definition he has for that is more intensive or larger scale commercial or medium density residential development, which may also include institutional, light industrial, or civic uses. So not that it goes, it still has that flexibility in portions of that area for the more intensive, larger scale commercial, but also provides that flexibility for the residential. Another thing I want to speak to is medium density residential. I think we talked about that a lot. You'll see it in the yellow here. You'll see it in item number 5 on the map you're looking at. Medium density residential, you might think, okay, well, maybe that's 4 plexes, 6 plexes, things like that. It is, but also it does allow for, in the definition, let me just read that. Missing middle type housing, but also some small neighborhood business opportunities as well. So it's not just residential. There would be an opportunity for like a neighborhood coffee shop or a neighborhood, something like that the neighborhood could utilize. So those are, I think, the 2 that when I looked at it the first time, I was like, well, medium density residential, is that just residential, or does it allow for some commercial? It does allow for some low intensity commercial. And then same with the other one I just said, community mixed use. So
Aaron, just to piggyback on that too, and I had that neighborhood oriented commercial establishments as a special use. So if we were going to do something like that, there would be some special use requirements, some similar to what you're, doing. You could have put in some site planning standards similar to what you're doing with the Fulton Street corridor. Also, maybe it's worth also mentioning that these future land use areas, the next step sort of down from 50,000 feet is then actually changing the underlying zoning to facilitate these types of uses. And you can have more than one zoning district within a future land use category. So some of these categories where I'm showing, medium density residential, or we're showing community mixed use, when we drill down and we actually update the city's future, when we update the zoning map itself, we can have further gradations within these land use categories with multiple base zoning districts contained within a single use. Okay, I guess this was the last one, I think. So bottom right corner, this was kind of a fun one. Spent quite a bit of time thinking about this. Number 6, that's actually by Shambo Park. So I walked around, driven around all these areas quite a bit over the last year. That area is kind of interesting. You've got the meat market over there. You've got the mobile home park. You got the little depot. I kind of showed that as a little neighborhood mixed use there. Maybe as that area grows, there may be an opportunity to, maybe there's that little, neighborhood oriented, business opportunity there. And then I showed some medium density residential flanking Shambo Park. So again, the idea here is like, let's use these assets that you have to leverage to get some, some quality development and some little bit higher intensity development that's going to provide a bigger bang for your buck in terms of property taxes. So the thought here was, create, potentially there's an opportunity to add a little bit of density there. And then as you go north towards that phantom subdivision up there, whatever that thing's called, I always forget, Longview Drive or something. So it's platted there, but it doesn't actually exist. That we're showing as additional, residential opportunity. And then as you go up north, D, in and around to the west and the east of Swan Park, a couple single, more lower density residential we're showing there. Those were also, again, shown, you can see that was shown on the left on the existing land use map. And then one of the differences I made here is, I've got those orange dots. So again, the idea here is, as the city grows, as you create these new neighborhoods, that there may be opportunities to have some of these smaller neighborhood-oriented businesses, whether that's a, mom and pop salon or a coffee shop or a neighborhood bar or whatever it might be. That we're not just doing large, monocrops of residential. That we are kind of mimicking those more traditional neighborhood development patterns that incorporated a little bit of neighborhood businesses in them. All right, timeline. Present the draft plan. Did that tonight. Again, by next week, I'll have this actual plan formatted, and we'll get that out to you guys. We'll post it on the website. We'll have a whole month. Hopefully, you all have take opportunity to look at it and come to the next meeting on the. I have February 10th on there. February 3rd, I believe, is the next scheduled Plan Commission meeting. So whether it's the 3rd or the 10th, we'll have that discussion in a minute. But the Plan Commission, after providing additional feedback, I'd like you to recommend the plan for adoption. You'd actually ideally have a unanimous vote or motion in support of a resolution recommending adoption of the comprehensive plan to the Common Council. On February 16th, the Common Council I'll do a presentation of the final plan. The Council will hold a public hearing on the plan, and then we'll come back on March 2nd, do a final presentation, and if it's ready for prime time, and the plan would be adopted at that time. That's it.
So those of you that have been on City Planning Commission for a long time, you'll remember back when we had to do the comprehensive plan and spent weeks and months and even a couple of years to put something in place, but that's because we didn't have anything to begin with. So I think we've been able to, with Andrew doing the majority of the work here, been able to shorten this because we had a plan already in place, and we didn't want to get this plan so out of that we weren't even close. I think it's a good time to get this updated before it just is no longer useful. So thanks, Andrew, for doing that. I think that's a good timeline that we can work with. Hopefully we get some comments at the public hearings, obviously, because no matter what you think of, Andrew, or any of the planning commissioners think of, there's going to be different plans that people have for their property, and it'd be nice to hear those.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor, and also, again, would, I guess, reiterate, when we get around to that final round of updates to the zoning code, I think what I would like to see, if we do, when we go and update the zoning code to sort of implement this future land use vision, I would really like to see us do some test fits, engage with property owners, developers, talk to the realtors. This needs to be grounded in the reality of what's buildable and practical in the community too. So I think that's going to be important as we move forward and do that final round of updates to the zoning code.
Anybody have any comments? All right. Thanks, Andrew. We'll be looking forward to the February 3rd meeting to see the final draft. And you're going to get it up on the site, you said, it maybe even by the end of this week?
Yeah, I'll get it up on the website. It's looking like probably be the middle part of next week, but I'll get it posted and I'll send it out. I'll have Sandy send it out to everyone on Plan Commission.
Great. All right. Sounds wonderful. All right, let's move on then. We have some reports that I think Aaron or Andrew, one of these guys, is going to go over. This has to do with our building permits and also our code enforcement.
Yep. Nothing out of the ordinary with code enforcement. Really nothing notable. With if it's okay, Mayor, if I move to the economic development update, are you all right with that?
Yeah, go. You go.
Okay. We are going to be meeting again with Terry Schultz, Ron Sari from the school district, Noah Lenke, and Dave Teal from Waupaca County Economic Development, and then Bill Zeinert, who's going to be helping us with a marketing project that we're working on. Noah has put together, I think he has over 30 of the 50 videos done for marketing Waupaca. I'm going to send you guys a link as plan commissioners on that. You guys might be interested. They're really cool, really well done videos. There are a couple that I've talked to him about kind of shooting some more B-roll for and adding in. As a couple of them I'd like a little more. And it was mainly my fault for not adding it in the first place, not his. So I'll shoot you that right after this meeting so you guys can just kind of peruse through those videos. But we are going to talk about starting to inject what we have in our video library into the marketing campaign, which will be that social media type advertising. I probably said it in council last night, but I'll say it again. If you go online and you're searching for Nike shoes, you go on Facebook and all of a sudden Nike shoes pop up because it knows what you're thinking. That's kind of what we're trying to do. The Waupaca County Economic Development Corporation has actually purchased that type of data for the whole county. We will be the first city or municipality in the county to actually utilize it. That's why Dave Teal's at the table. So we're excited to get that moving and continuing it forward. Another thing, kind of economic development related, CDBG grant. We're looking at working with our grant writer on getting a bunch of resolutions in place and preparing a grant application in which we would partner with CAP Services for rental assistance. That's a $1.3 million grant. It would serve actually the entire CAP Services area. That's really the only chance we have at it if we serve that broader area. A municipality, though, has to be the applicant for it because we have that grant writer and because the city of Waupaca and owners of rental units could benefit from it. We're going to go ahead and move forward with that. And we, a lot of times with those programs, a lot of it's about promoting it. So we feel like we can promote it really well in the city, assuming we get it, which I don't want to assume that it's a large grant, but we did do a pre-application. And I know that they did respond pretty favorably. So we're optimistic and we'll continue to work through that. And just
Aaron, can I interrupt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is that grant with or from?
It's the CDBG Community Development Block Grant through the Department of Administration. So that is, I don't know if you guys have read, I was just talking to the mayor about it the other day. There was just an article in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that talked about, the moratorium on evictions has been very good for a lot of people struggling through the COVID financially, the COVID crisis. So it's great that they can't get evicted, but then that ultimately, in a lot of scenarios, just passes the buck on to the owner of that property. And now they can't make ends meet because they may not have the income coming in to do it. So this is to help the owners of those properties, and also obviously helps keep those people in their units. So that's what this money is for. So also been working with Green Tree Housing, continuing on homes. I wanted to give a quick update. We have flipped the calendar. So we've talked about housing a lot this year. When we compare housing the last 2 years, so if we look at 2018, we had 4 single family homes. 2019, we had 5. 2020, we had 21 new single family homes. In 2018, I'm going to apartment buildings now in units. If you guys remember, obviously the premier units were, the building permits were issued for that. So we had 4 buildings, a total of 48 new units. In 2019, we did not have any. And then in this year, in 2020, with the Swiderski permits getting issued, 5 permits issued for 5 buildings with 56 new units there. So that is a good trend, and we've been talking with some home builders here even in the early part of this year, and we have reason to believe that that trend will continue through 2021, and we're hopeful to see that. Commercial buildings, want to touch on that. In 2019, we had 2, and in 2020, we had 1. So that was Dunkin' Donuts. And then new condos or duplexes, we had 1 built in 2019 and actually 0 in 2020. So multifamily, large multifamily, and single family were the big. St. Mary's Church property, we just extended an agreement with Mr. Pedrelli last night at the council meeting. That'll extend through the end of 2021. Did talk to council last night about wanting to bring something forward and how the city can be involved in helping nudge development along, maybe through TIF 10. But we'll talk about that, and I'll bring more detail forward in the next couple months, hopefully mid to end of winter. Pat, you asked about Ruby's Pantry. I did get a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks on that because there was cranes there and so on and so forth. Those cranes were there because our building inspectors have been working with them. They did give a permit to re-roof. There was actually some safety concerns. Large, heavy HVAC units have been sitting on that roof for a long time, and it was causing structural problems, leaking. And they're trying to, right now, they are working through mold removal and asbestos abatement and things like that. And from a safety standpoint, it made sense to allow the removal of those types of things in a re-roof. As we talked about earlier in this meeting, really, when they come forward for a conditional use permit, we actually just had a meeting with them today. The earliest they could probably apply for that, if everything moves along our timelines, it would be early April 7th is what we're looking at. So that's kind of what to expect there.
Aaron, did you, when you had those conversations, do you think that they're going to make a move then about that time? Do they still seem interested in that building? From that respect?
Yes, they do. We would fully anticipate them to bring something forward at that time. We actually had a conversation with them, Justin, myself, Jeff, today, a fairly lengthy one about site plan, because we already know what the site plan requirements are as we adopted in our code. So we kind of communicated that with them in about an hour-and-a-half conversation today, so they can work towards preparing for that. So that's where we're at with that. And then the last thing, just the business incentive program. You guys have heard a ton about it. We continue to get good interest. We actually expect a possible application to be in, the first application by the end of this week, and hopefully many more after that. So that's all I have from an economic development standpoint. Oh, other than we did hear today, the sale was final of the Pizza Hut, the old Pizza Hut building. And I would expect something to come forward on that soon too.
So are they saying what they're going to use it for yet, Aaron?
They are, but I can't share it yet.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys will
All
be
right.
the first to know, though.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for the good of the meeting tonight? Thanks for hanging in there tonight. I'm glad everything went well with our internet, and we made it through. It was worthwhile.
Yeah.
So for adjournment.
Olson,
All right.
second.
Who was the motion? Pat, was it?
Yes.
Okay. Motion by Pat Ferris, second by Eric Olson, that we adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Against? Motion carried. We're adjourned at 6:46. Drive safe. Stay out of Washington.